The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Gabriel D. Vine from Future Rant.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And hello, posterity. I hope things are good in the future.
J.W. Weatherman from mathbot.com.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Theo Goodman from Proof of Work Media.
Good evening, everyone.
Jeffrey Jones from the Bitcoin News Show.
Glad to be talking Bitcoin.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue 1, IBM versus Bitcoin. It started with a non-stop advertising. IBM is changing the world by putting a diamond on a blockchain. But it ends with Forbes throwing down the gauntlet. Contrary to what you might have been taught in school, Big Blue believes that you do not need a token of value to secure your blockchain, and that using the blockchain as a decentralized database will be more successful than using the blockchain for a decentralized cryptocurrency. Gabriel D. Vine, is Forbes right?
Well, I did not read the article. I usually skip everything from Forbes. And there's about 900 warnings and all sorts of bullshit. I'm just and by this stupid GDPR thing. It's absolutely killing business here. It's going to be down another 3 steps. I mean, so IBM, I don't even know. Just skip me.
J.W. Weatherman.
I love it, man. I love that it's IBM. Could you ask for a more quintessential, the only thing that would be better if it was maybe HP, just an old, crusty, stupid company that hasn't been interesting or relevant for a really long time. And it's so bad that even Forbes can correct them. If I don't know, they should definitely be embarrassed about this nonsense, but they're probably able to raise money on it. I don't know. They've just been basically a consulting company in my mind for a really long time, and not even a particularly good one. So I'm kind of who cares? But I am encouraged that they were smacked around a bit by it.
The commercials assure me that they've got this diamond smuggling thing under control. Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. They've completely solved the problem of physical assets being able to be stolen or transported or used in any malicious way at all. They've mastered the molecules in the universe, and you just can't do anything bad with diamonds anymore. It really is so stupid, right? It's so laughable that yeah. But I mean, it does kind of. I guess it's worth talking about the fact that the reason that Bitcoin is so amazing, and the reason that I struggled for a long time to have interest in it, was thinking that, if it's digital, it's not as good as something that's physical, right? To use as money. And that if we could find a way to use something like gold as money, we'd be better off, because it would be easier for people to adopt it, and it's just more natural, and maybe it's easier to prevent theft or whatever. But the great thing about Bitcoin is none of those things are true. It has to be digital in order to be really, really hard to steal. And that's why one way or another we're going to end up with the digital money, because digital items just simply work better for money. And I think a lot of people are going to struggle with that. But once they, I don't know. Now I want to say a lot of people are going to struggle with that, and then they'll get over it. But after Seifdien's interview the other day, I love the idea that they'll never understand it. It doesn't matter. It matters no more than people that were using seashells had to understand that gold was better. All they had to understand is that seashells became worthless over a few months, and then they had to use gold. So, but yeah, physical money is not the way to go anymore.
Bad news for those holding seashells. Theo Goodman.
I like physical money. I don't think it's over for physical money. But as far as IBM is concerned, they need exposure because they're doing a lot of business in the private blockchain, or what's referred to as DLT, distributed ledger technology, and all that kind of stuff. And they just need to profile themselves as a blockchain company now. And I think this is just part of that whole thing. I don't even think it's very, I don't think that they think they're going to do better than Bitcoin. I think the people are not completely stupid there. They just need, it's just part of the PR basically. So I think that's just part of their advertising and the PR. And I think seashells can have a lot of value if they're given to you by someone because you did something good to help them, and then you put it on your house and everybody knows why it's on your house.
A seashell of love. And we'd just like to ask everyone to give us a thumbs up. We have a blockchain-based thumbs up discovery system. The more thumbs up that you give us, the more people find the show. And we're going to put it on a blockchain, and we're going to link it up with IBM. Jeffrey Jones, has blockchaining saved the world like IBM says?
Oh my God. Well, this is pretty typical. A little bit has been already said about this, but essentially IBM is no longer relevant. They have literally got out of anything to do with any type of relevancy when it comes to technological innovation years and years ago. They are only now surviving off of consultation and patents. That's the only thing that is keeping IBM afloat. They have not contributed nearly anything to the overall computing space in many, many years. They essentially now just produce data centers and even then outsource most of the software for that. So it's really kind of funny to have these companies like these companies that used to be relevant 20, 30 years ago try to comment on the latest technology that we're trying to innovate with today. It's completely antithetical, completely makes no sense. You have to, we've said this on the show so many times, Thomas, that, blockchains are extremely inefficient. They are not good databases. They will not replace databases. As a developer, I can tell you right now, blockchains are not going to replace databases. We still need databases for all sorts of myriad of things, from just basic tasks to mom and pop shops, to scaled all the way up to powering things like AWS and Microsoft Azure. This is how the world operates on a standard, and a database is just a basic ledger anyway. The difference between a database and a blockchain is the blockchain is way, way, way more inefficient because it stores the records on every single node across the planet. And again, it does that for a very specific reason, so that it can keep censorship resistance, so that it can stay decentralized. This is the most important part about Bitcoin. And still, these companies are stuck in 2016. Not understanding that it's Bitcoin, not blockchain. They're still trying to say that blockchain things are relevant. I mean, R3 already threw in the towel recently, last year already saying that they're blockchain inspired now. They're not actually blockchain. They went with the DLT route. So now they're, as Theo said, this distributed ledger technology is what people are touting, trying to stay relevant. These large old school companies that, again, produce nothing new. This is the writing on the wall when you see these old companies try to downplay this stuff. Again, just like Jamie Dimon, eventually they will all capitulate. They will all understand why blockchain is important, why it's here, and what is the best blockchain. And just look at the scoreboard. Bitcoin is the only public decentralized blockchain at scale in production today, has been for years, and likely will be for years to come. EOS and all these other ridiculous tokens, they haven't even launched mainnets, and if they have, it's going to be hacked. It's going to be 51% attacked, and it's going to go nowhere. So that's basically, what people need to understand is this is just another, virtue signaling. This is just trying to stay relevant. This is just another old school company trying to comment on new technology that they have no idea about.
I think Vortex makes a lot of really good points, and I'd like to expand on two of them. One, mentioning that these mature technology companies have trouble with innovation and are their hands are tied by red tape, and that's a typical phase in the life cycle of companies. In fact, there's a guy, I believe his name is Azores. He's a famous guy, been around for decades, in business theory and doing business education. My dad actually took like an executive or a management course back in the 80s, I think, with him. But he's got this great system where, the startup, first there's like the phase, like before it's the like the romance before you even do anything. And then you go and then you start, working it out. And then you're like in infancy, and then you can go into go-go when you start making lots of money. It's going crazy. That's where a lot of these, early stage startups are. And then you go through a couple more phases, and then you hit your peak. And then after that is the bureaucratic phase. And that's actually the first phase of the downfall. And you can tell these companies are already in their downslide, even though they're maybe making more money than ever before, because they can't do innovation anymore. They've bureaucratized the innovation out of their companies. And that's exactly what Microsoft, IBM, these giant tech behemoths. Even I would say Google is probably heading from peak into bureaucracy now-ish. You can always, save things by doing maybe a big restructuring, but it's very difficult with these large companies. And regarding, this blockchain thing, I actually just wanted to ask the panel and our live chat and all of our viewers, because Vortex mentioned, they're taking it back to 2016, I believe he said, but really 2014 is when all this bullshit started. And I was wondering if anybody is actually using, because basically what they did was, oh, Bitcoin is really great, so let's try to steal the thunder and try to get some things, maybe try to raise some money, just raise some, throw out some junk bonds, ICOs, whatever, and, make some money for our consulting arm, is basically how they looked at it. And they threw billions upon billions. It must be 50, 100, or maybe even hundreds of billions at these, I could be wrong about that. And I know it's at least 10 or 20 billion on these blockchain, quote unquote, projects and distributed ledger tech projects. Are any of these like private or consortium federated blockchains? Check out JW's federated video. It's very good. And that's basically one step better than a single person owning it. Are there any of these private blockchain projects actually in production and being used by multi-million-dollar systems?
There has only been tests from R3.
It's trials. It's all trials.
On and on and on. It is trials. It is tests. It is testing out between company to company. It is basically the ecosystem right now figuring out that Bitcoin is where it's at. And it's going to take a while, but this is where they're at right now, trying to go through all of these ridiculous things like Hyperledger and on, trying to imitate the utility and efficiency that Bitcoin can bring us. And it's just been falling on their faces. Years later, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars later, it went from blockchain to distributed ledger technology to whatever the hell they're going to do next. And nothing is ever has come to fruition yet.
Yeah, the German rail is, it's not live. Of course, it's not live, but they have the most, I believe, now, of course, I'm not 100% sure. They have the most projects in production and they're doing a whole lot with it. And, okay, so I don't think a lot of these companies, they don't want Bitcoin, but they don't even want to use blockchain for a value transfer like Bitcoin is. They want to do it for time stamping or, I don't know, some kind of smart contracts and things like that.
No, I'm just talking about anything.
No. I agree. Oh, no, I agree. I totally agree with that. Is it being used? I think they're the closest. I mean, of course, nobody knows because we're not in the company, but I believe they're one of the closest to actually, quote, being used, but I don't know the exact project. But I was just talking to someone yesterday about it, because if they wanted to timestamp, let's say, for instance, they wanted to timestamp the actual arrival times of trains to make it more transparent that it's actually true, that wouldn't really be great to have on a private blockchain, because what's the point then? But the other thing is that even if they did want to use Bitcoin, it would be really difficult for some things because, for example, if they use, I'm not a lawyer and all that, but you can't get insurance. If you use a public chain, they might be at risk of not being able to have insurance for some of their activities that they're doing because they can't control that. You see what I mean? But if they have a private blockchain, then they can trace back in a pretty transparent way, who controls what. So they're also in a tantrum about, they can't, some of them, or they think they can't, or it's not clear legally if they can. They'd have to like restructure the whole company and all that. So it's a little bit of both. It's both the bullshit and it's both they just can't.
It might be unsafe for them to store, like if you were a law firm and you tried to store a document on the blockchain, who really is owning that document? Who's really keeping it safe for you? You can't really say. But if you try to store your document on the Microsoft blockchain, then you can trust Microsoft because Microsoft's got it. And obviously they must be tracking diamonds and other supply shipments on these blockchains. They won't stop going on about these supply shipments. What it really shows you, I think, and they're not saying this in the commercials, is the industry never updated from paper bills of lading. they've still been moving all these goods around with paper systems. You know how you think in your mind they'll have a little phone and they'll scan this and they'll scan that and they'll dump the oil in the bucket? No, they're moving all these things around with papers and signatures. And instead of switching to a non-paper system, they're switching to a blockchain system. Isn't that it? More on that, JW? Ready to go to the exit question? No.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about what Vortex was saying about how there's nothing live, right? Like it's all just hype, and I think that it continues the trend that the valuation that these projects have is directly is inversely proportional to how much they've actually produced. Because if you actually have something that exists, it's a lot harder to sell sunshine and flowers, and this is going to solve all the problems of the world. So these projects, they're not dumb to make sure that there's no code or very little. And if there's any criticism, it's, oh, we're just in beta. Because once they go live, everybody will see that it's just vaporware, right? There's no clothes on the emperor. The one project that I think is interesting for this sort of stuff in the long term, well, two, both of them are at Blockstream. One is Simplicity, which would, and there's other projects like this too that will bring smart contracts to Bitcoin and allow for all kinds of interesting applications. And the other is the Liquid sidechain. The problem with both of those projects from a scammer's point of view is that one, they'll actually work, so they're harder to sell, all the bullshit like we said, and two, they don't require another token, right? They're powered by Bitcoin. So I think what we'll see is there'll be some interesting stuff here, but as usual, like the scammers will be the first people to show up that will sell nonsense, then the real technology will arrive and be pretty awesome.
Well, I want to add one more project, which of course is Peter Todd's open timestamps. This is what Peter Todd has made this for. He's basically designed this so that we can use Bitcoin for exactly this, for exactly what these private blockchains are describing that they want to be.
And remember, it's not uncommon for banks or other large systems to do huge trial programs like this with programmers, with marketers, with a whole group of people working on it for months and even years, and then to say, well, we can't do it. And there might be a good reason for not doing it. There might be a bad reason for not doing it, like it's more efficient than your current system. If you think back to General Motors, they had the EV in the 90s and they had the Hummer. They had to get rid of the EV because it was so fuel efficient. It made the rest of their line, especially the Hummer, look like gas guzzlers. In the same way, if the bank really produced a superior system, they would be destroying their own system where they make all their fees. It's not so much about switching to a new system. It's more about transitioning away from the old system as long as they can. As long as they can keep making their fees, they're going to stick with this old system. But let's move on to the exit question. How much further will this blockchain, not Bitcoin, nonsense go on? 6 weeks, 6 months, or forever? Gabriel D. Vine.
I'm going to say we're looking at a solid 3 more years of total bullshit before the wider society begins to catch on, or at least the decision makers that have lost a lot of money. So there's a bunch of jackasses out there that didn't do the proper research who are now millions and millions and billions in the hole because they spent money on these stupid projects that lost everybody their investment. So I'm going to say 3 years, then things will begin trailing off for another 10.
3 more years of winter from Gabriel D. Vine. J.W. Weatherman.
I was actually going to say 2 years. I think it'll last for another 2 years. I think it'll drop off pretty drastically, though. I think at some point the tides will shift, just like with I don't know, machine learning or whatever the buzzword was 3 years ago. I don't even remember what it was 3 years ago. But there was a buzzword that everybody was really excited about all across high tech, and it was nothing. And private blockchains will be that. But I think I agree. I think they've still got a couple of years of legs left in them.
Let me tell you one word about the future: chatbots. Theo Goodman, over or under 2 to 3 years? What do you got?
Over, definitely. And hey, maybe there is some kind of strange use for a private blockchain, but we just don't know yet. It's possible. It could be better than a database in some cases.
Yeah, I agree. We really don't know, but it doesn't seem like there's too much. Certainly nothing. There's no low hanging fruit. Let's put it that way.
I think you could use it for a digital currency. Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah, well, I mean, R3 already raised hundreds of billions of dollars on the prospect of being a blockchain technology company, and then overnight switched up and said, by the way, we never actually said we were a blockchain. So people can go for a while and take hundreds of billions of dollars and then completely switch. Like you said, Thomas, it's they can switch overnight. And I mean, how long is this going to last? It's going to last until the VCs stop giving these freaking retards money. Stop throwing money at this, and then it'll stop. Until then, if you're going to keep, if CryptoKitties is going to raise $9 million or $10 million, whatever it is, if you're going to give a company, a project like CryptoKitties, $10 million, then yeah, this is going to last a little bit longer. So do more research and stop investing in these ridiculous ideas that'll most likely go nowhere, and focus on the innovation. Focus on where the developers are innovating, and that is on Bitcoin.
I think that CryptoKitties is good. It's on public blockchain too, and also, yeah, that's true. I like the.
Is it $10 million good, Theo?
Well, that's up to the VC, the people who invest in it. They can risk that. That's up to them. I mean, you don't have. Nobody has to
make their own. They did make their own product. CryptoKitties is a product. They made it.
Someone bought one for 140,000. So I don't know. I also talk about how it's not a simple. Why I say that it's not sovereign artwork, but that's a kind of technical discussion to not get total off track. But as far as the just one thing about like R3 kind of pivoting and saying we don't need blockchain, the next step that's coming is there's going to be different things like Hashgraph and gossip protocols and all this stuff. But it also is like private, semi-private stuff, like IOTA, for example. You know, they say they're not a blockchain, for example. You see what I mean? So the trend is going in that direction where people think that even these other ideas that they think are better than blockchain, and in the end it has some kind of central point of control that they don't want to say is a central point of control, but then when it goes live, like IOTA, we're seeing where that plays a big part in it.
I just want to point out that your point absolutely stands, although Gossip Protocol itself is not part of that. Gossip protocols have been around since the 80s, and they're used in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying they use that catchphrase. That's one of the new catchphrases that's going to be coming a lot. You're going to hear more and more and more, especially with private stuff.
And I just like to say that IOTA is complete crap, completely not secure. And you need to do your research if you're putting any type of money into that thing, especially when you look into their white paper that was completely plagiarized.
I think it's going to be difficult going forward. It's like your favorite ice cream manufacturer is suddenly making non-dairy ice cream, and they're using non-dairy milk, and they're getting it from non-dairy cows. You're supposed to think everything's normal and everything's all the same, but it's not. JW, more on this issue?
I was just going to say, completely agree with Vortex there on IOTA, but I also want to put out the disclaimer. If you don't want to listen to Vortex and you're pretty sure you want to put money into IOTA anyway, I hope that you put in as much as possible. Like, I really want you to go all in on it, because that's the best way for you to improve the world.
It's like you're standing next to the craps table telling them to put it all on hard 8. Just keep going. Just keep going. Well, let's move on to issue 2, tailspin. Google searches for Bitcoin plummeted this year, dropping more than 75% since January. With this decline comes a malaise, a lack of interest in Bitcoin, and even a lack of interest in these videos. Subscribers are indeed down, but you can subscribe now and reverse that trend. The article suggests that Bitcoin needs a new narrative to reestablish global attention. J.W. Weatherman, are they right? Does Bitcoin need a new narrative? And what might this new narrative be?
Nope. The old narrative's as good as ever. The price is a pretty good indication of that. People like me that got in at the all-time high are a little, that we're having to pay our dues. But if you look at the fact that the price is so high from where it was just 3 or 4 years ago, the adoption of Bitcoin as a store of value, as a secure way to save your money from central banks screwing you over, is a great narrative. It's a true narrative. It's being proved out day by day. More people are learning about it, and it's coming at a great clip. So We're also adding things to make transactions easier. So by the time we really need that, because right now I wouldn't suggest anybody spend their Bitcoin, frankly. But by the time we're at the point where the price is, leveled out, we have full global adoption of the new money that Saifedean explains will happen because it's an economic truth called Gresham's law. Yeah, it's a great story, and it doesn't even matter if people totally understand it.
Theo Goodman.
Wrecked. Dump it all. No, I think that it doesn't matter at all, and people just like to buy expensive Bitcoin, and that's why they only like to buy expensive Bitcoin. Nobody likes to buy cheap Bitcoin, and so they're not searching for it. So when it gets really expensive, then everyone's going to search for it. How do I buy it? How do I buy it? How do I buy it? And then they're all going to complain later, and then they'll stay with Bitcoin or they'll go into other stuff. Who knows? But as far as interest declining, I disagree. I think this is a lot different from my perspective, what I'm seeing, it's a lot different than 2014. I try to compare like a lot of, at least the price and some of the things. It's very similar to 2014 after the big run up to 1,000. And the difference now is the number of meetups. Of course, a lot of the meetups are like blockchain, blah, 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 or whatever, but it doesn't matter. All those people at the blockchain, whatever meetups that are all growing and stuff, they get in contact with crypto and Bitcoin too. They all have heard of it and they get in contact with it. So that's going to be something they're going to have to question, what they're doing. Is that the right way or not? Or shouldn't I get some Bitcoin too? They all are getting exposed to that kind of virus in all of these other events, even though it's just called, private blockchain, or it's an ICO event or whatever. All of them are getting exposed to the same ideas. So I think it's really weird. It's really growing a lot, actually.
If everybody's going to reject the question, I want to reject the question too. I was just thinking this means that Theo and me have done a really good job, and that thanks to the work of the World Crypto Network and everybody else here, that everybody knows about Bitcoin and they know about blockchain and they're not searching for it anymore. And they're like, yeah, of course, I know about Bitcoin. Why do I need to Google that? It's like, you don't Google things you know about. Jeffrey Jones, your thoughts?
Yeah, not a whole lot of people visit internet.com anymore. Not a whole lot of people visit AOL.com anymore. And so, yeah, once people already know about the concept, but yeah, no, it's this type of narrative, this struggling that they try to do. They always try to, push Bitcoin down, all of these mainstream media articles. And of course, struggling is just complete BS. This was $1,000 January of 2017, a few $100s the January before that. This is market cycles. Bitcoin basically, excuse me. Bitcoin goes up about thousands of percent and then drops about 80%. Every time. It's done this many times, and it will continue to do this. And this is all a part of its market cycles as it goes on its S-curve adoption all the way up. And so we're going to have another run up when we go to 100,000. People are going to again say that Bitcoin has dropped to $50,000. So it is struggling. It is now struggling because it's dropped 50% this year from $100,000 to $50,000. And it absolutely does not need a new narrative. The narrative still is the same. The narrative is still very clear, which is to take on the Federal Reserve, to take on the central banking paradigm that we've used for the past few hundred years, that have caused nothing but world wars and famine and just the thievery of and destruction of the actual government's people, the theft of the people's wealth through things like inflation and these horrible monetary policies. This is what Bitcoin is here to end. This is what Bitcoin is here to destroy. I only follow one account on Twitter for a reason: to bring this back, to bring this narrative back, to bring attention back to the reason why we're all here, the reason why we got into Bitcoin, the reason why proof of work exists, the reason why blockchain came into existence is because to take on the Federal Reserve. This is the people's direct answer to central banking. This is the people's direct answer to 2008, to the financial crisis, to the world wars, and on and on and on. So again, people just, you need to read Saifedean's book, but the Bitcoin Standard, I recommend to everybody to check it out. But it's very clear. We've had 2 world wars in 1 century. That is absolutely unheard of and ridiculous. And the reason why is because of cheap money, because they could just print money out of thin air. So this is very, very important. The narrative does not need to be changed at all. And as Saifedean says, Bitcoin is just an economic an economic certainty that will assert itself, whether people like it or not. It's going to come, it's going to be here, and you need only to look at the scoreboard. Look at the US dollar, then look at Bitcoin. Look at the scoreboard. Bitcoin will continue to eat the wealth of all of these things that you think has value, like stocks, like bonds, like the US dollar and fiat currencies. Their value will be sucked in, and this is just another example of the system fighting back, trying to say that, oh, the narrative is down, nobody cares about Bitcoin. But really, as the panel has said, innovation moves forward. Segwit is now over 45% of the network. Lightning Network is now live and evolving at record pace, and this is where we're at. Bitcoin continues to grow and evolve.
Gabriel Devine, is Jeffrey Jones correct? The virus has taken hold and the host has no chance.
Yes, and not only that, I'd like to echo Vortex's sentiment about this word struggling. It's really funny to see them put that in the headlines. And, not only is it extremely misleading and totally corrupt to say things like that, but it has a real effect. And I was going to save this for my story of the week, but a colleague of mine was like, "Oh yeah, I got to talk to you about Bitcoin sometime. I still don't get that thing." And I heard that it's gone down a lot, and so I'm kind of staying away, And this is exactly the type of media coverage that continues to make people poor, which is the point. These media organizations are owned by very few corporations, and they want to keep the power. They don't want you to be financially independent. They don't want you to have access to sound money for the first time in 100 years. And I've been having this conversation a lot with family and friends recently. They're like, "Oh, I heard Bitcoin went down a lot. You must be upset." And I'm just like, well, it's up 700% over the last year. So, I don't have that much, but that's pretty cool. I could buy 7 times as many popsicles as I could last year. And then I say, you do realize that Bitcoin is attempting to take the mantle of sound money, something that hasn't existed for 100 or more years, and they don't want to hear it. It's like a immune reaction, because they know that if they go down that path, they'll have to do a lot of work to change their Weltanschauung. How do you say that in English? A view of the world, world perspective. Theo,
Yeah.
help me out.
That's right. Yeah, world perspective. That's good.
Yeah, their worldview, and they have to, it is a lot of work. And as JW pointed out, this is a reality that you're going to have to deal with, whether you understand it or not. Bitcoin will be sound money in the world, whether you understand it or do the research or anything like that. It's not like this. It's not like oh well, I want to use Snapchat, but my friends use some other very similar social network, and there's 7 different competing. That's not how it happens with money. So struggling my ass.
And people do have to take the risk. It's not just, oh, I heard about Bitcoin and, now you're rich. You have to hear about Bitcoin, go read about it. You have to take the risk of sending your money off into some hole. It might disappear. You might get stolen. You might send it to the wrong person. It's very easy. It goes up. It doubles. You sell. I know people that went from $10 to $20. They're out. They made a great deal, right? But you didn't know it was going to go to 7,000. All of this, no one knew. Advice, though, when I heard about Bitcoin in 2010, it was too much work for me to get into. I thought it was World of Warcraft money. I heard about it 3 years later. Oh, I felt bad, but the people who did the work early, they got into it. When I heard about it 3 years later, I did the work. I got into it. I put, my meager savings into Bitcoin. And now 5 years after that, I'm saying to you the same thing. Do the work. Put your meager savings in, maybe buy it dollar cost averaging, $100 a week or $10 a week. Something like that. Put it in slowly. Give it a try. Again, you're taking the risk. If it goes up, you might sell. If it goes down, you might sell. We don't know. No one knows. But take that risk and live with it. Or if you can't take the risk, don't feel bad about not getting the reward. They're linked, and there's more. There's lots been written on that. But let's move on to the exit question. The price of Bitcoin this time next week, higher or lower? JW Weatherman.
I'm going to say higher, but just because I feel like saying higher. I don't have any reason to think that I know what the market's going to do in the short term, but this is what I do know. I do know that the average lifespan of a government issued currency is somewhere in the 20-year range. And so there are going to be this year, I don't know how many countries there are in the globe, but you could do the math. There's going to be some currencies that fail this year, just like there were currencies that failed last year and the year before. And that is a great it's great advertisement for Bitcoin, right? Like our competition sucks so bad that they go bankrupt on average every 20 something years. Like you just can't ask for anything better than that. So I don't know what it's going to be in the next couple weeks, but even though I bought at the all-time high, I am still feeling very good.
Well, it's great to be included in the game of currencies. I read the article this week from Venezuela, and they're talking about how much they hate the bolivar and how much they love Bitcoin. And all we need to do is be in that conversation where you're like, oh, there's the dollar, there's the bolivar, there's the Bitcoin. And pretty soon you're like, oh, the dollar, the pound in Bitcoin, or pound the dollar in Bitcoin. Well, let's go on to Theo Goodman. The panel is trending higher. Are you sticking with that?
Dump it.
Jeffrey Jones, it's a mixed panel. Higher or lower?
No, I mean, Bitcoin is definitely going to be going sideways for a little bit here before we have another bull rally, somewhere in the fall.
Higher or lower? And now a push. Gabriel Devine, can you break the tie?
I definitely cannot. I am also voting for flat.
Oh, we're going to just say higher because it always goes higher on a long enough timeline. Did you know the World Crypto Network has its own audio podcast with even more shows than you get on the YouTube channel? Look, we've got the JW Weatherman Show bit. I wonder what that's about. And the Adam Meister Show and Andy Hoffman and much more on the World Crypto Network podcast. Subscribe today. It's free in iTunes and Acast. Moving on to issue 3, international Bitcoin mining. For far too long, Bitcoin mining has been centralized in the People's Republic of China, but it looks like all that's going to change with a major mining operation opening in the United States, a province in Quebec, Canada, having so many power requests it must shut them down, and even a company in Japan launching their own Bitcoin miner to compete with Bitmain. Theo Goodman, which one of these events is the most exciting? And is the Bitcoin mining virus finally beginning to spread worldwide?
The virus is spreading worldwide. It's good that there's competition in mining. It's really needed, that there's competitors producing different mining equipment. So that's good news. But let's not get too excited. Let's see it, let's see it first, how crypto is. And then evaluate if they're really building what they say they're building. Let's get these things operational first. So let's not get too excited. But it looks like definitely the mining virus is spreading big time. A lot of people are interested in it, trying to figure out how they can make money with it. And if you want to make money being a miner, you got to go big or go home, and you got to go real big. So this is some real big boys, trying to get into this. So let's see. I mean, if they get it right, they could really make a whole shitload of money, honestly. So people see that and they're going to go with that risk. And also, even if the miners are not that as good as they say they are, the first batch will be bought up. So they maybe can break even on that.
Breaking even's not good enough. Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah, it's first off, I just want to say that anytime I see the word cloud mining, I want to run away, far away. So make sure that you guys also take that into account, that anytime you see cloud mining, try to do your due diligence for sure, because so far in the past these have all been pretty horrible scams. For the most part, it's still far more efficient to just directly invest into the underlying asset that is Bitcoin instead of invest into these crazy huge cloud mining schemes and such like that. But mining is still a profitable business and will continue to be a profitable business for a while as Bitcoin's utility continues to grow. So we're going to see more and more mining across the world. And for those that have been in Bitcoin long enough, we've seen this as an inevitability for many years. Not only the fact that mining is going to take over, but mining that will become more and more decentralized. We have reached peak centralization, and we are now going over the hump to
more decentralized mining infrastructure. We have all sorts of technologies that are in the works to make this happen. But the biggest economic factor is, of course, that when China started their regulatory. Basically, they started posting all sorts of new regulations about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining that drove all sorts of players out of the country and across the world. And so now we're seeing, people come to Canada, people come to New York, people are going all over the place, and Bitcoin will continue to, the Bitcoin mining, will continue to further spread as long as it's profitable, and it's going to be profitable for the foreseeable future, at least that we're looking at now. And as around the world, if you look at the price of mining a Bitcoin, it's between $2,000 and $6,000, or between $2,000 and $4,000. And so that's almost doubling. You're almost doubling your price. And there's a few people out there that can get the prices really low. And so, in my opinion, this will only drive more efficiency. This will only drive more energy efficiency, create the world's largest green movement that you've ever seen. And we'll look back in history and say, I didn't know that Bitcoin was actually going to start the efficiency race, the energy efficiency race, to really get down to the most efficient way that we can do this. And that means leaving fossil fuels. That means going to actual natural energy resources. And so it's going to be a huge factor in driving that. This was, again, an inevitability, and the hash power continues to double every couple of weeks or so. I mean, it's just absolutely insane when you look at it, how fast it's growing. It looks like you're staring into the sun. It's massive. Look at the hash power, people. Look at it and watch. Really, really funny. Watch this. Compare it to the Bitcoin hash power, and it's just like Bitcoin going up and BCH just staying flat while Bitcoin just continues to go. We are now just on an insanely huge march towards powering the entire planet with Bitcoin, with hash power. We are now, as JW likes to say, I think, we can power just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of central banks, or maybe it was safety, but we can just power thousands of central banks at this point on the base layer for this brand new open decentralized central banking system that Bitcoin could bring along. Where nobody has control of the underlying asset. They can only have services on top of the asset. So I don't see this slowing down anytime soon. Bitcoin mining is going to continue to spread throughout the world.
Sure, we could run thousands of central banks, but who would want to? Thanks so much to Theo Goodman for joining us on the show. He had to leave. Gabriel D. Vine.
I'm glad you brought up mining in this show, because in my opinion, the biggest news this week is actually Matt Corallo's new proposal and code on GitHub, which he's calling Better Hash. This is a new protocol to replace the existing insufficient protocol for mining pools. So the mining pool code that people use in order to share hash power has a fairly centralized effect on the mining landscape, unfortunately, and it gives far too much power to the mining pool operators. And what the Blue Matt, or Matt Corallo, storied Bitcoin core developer has created, after having already made a mining communications protocol for just sending, I think it's called Fiber, in all caps. That was like 3 years ago, and I think that's helped mining block propagation quite a bit. But this is specifically for pools, to give a lot more power to the individual hash owners. So these are the members of the pools who are not the central operator of the pool. It gives them the power to choose which transactions go in blocks, so as to take that power out of the hands of the pool operators and decentralize it a bit more, thereby spreading out the power structure in the mining landscape more. Huge thing. And there was also a lot of really terrible inefficiencies and problems with the old protocol that was kind of created. It was kind of the vibe I got.
The name of the protocol was Stratum, just so the viewers
thanks.
are aware.
Yeah. So I got the vibe that Stratum was kind of thrown together because we didn't have anything, and it was like, well, let's cobble together, from the existing things. And it definitely was way better than nothing, because it allowed a lot more freedom for individual operators to come in and join a pool and be able to make small amounts of Bitcoin, and to have the pools grow. But it was really time for something, and something he was working on, I think, for at least 2 years, or at least thinking about and maybe working on for one. And so that's a fantastic development. I'm really, really grateful to Matt for all his work, but Better Hash is kind of like tipping the scales. It takes it over the top. And now, with as you pointed out, Thomas, with many farms opening all over the world, and manufacturing starting up in a lot of different places, I think we're really seeing I think that the centralization, it may go in waves, where we're definitely been on a decentralizing trend for at least 2 years, I would say. And at some point we might hit sort of a temporary max decentralization. We might see some more grouping together and maybe some consolidations. We could even see corporate, like buyouts and things like that, mergers, acquisitions. But then, as the tech evolves more and better tools come around, we might see, reverses. So this is a great situation. I think that we will never be as centralized as we were in the mid-teens ever again in the mining.
JW Weatherman, is Bitcoin mining spreading worldwide?
Absolutely. And one of the ways that you can know that there's really good news on the horizon is you can watch and see what the bad guys are doing. So the bad guys have been pushing really, really hard lately for a proof of work change, and that would cause all of the existing mining hardware to be bricked, like useless, right? Or at least far less useful, depending on how it's done. And that only could serve people that are basically end of lifing their equipment, right? If you have stuff that's about to go bad because it's coming to the end, there's nothing better than having all of your competitors nuked and not really being affected because your stuff is going bad anyway. So because they're pushing so hard for a proof of work change, I couldn't be more encouraged. It's one of the advantages of understanding economics and reading old books is current news is a lot easier to understand and interpret. So I encourage everybody to check out a book called Human Action by Ludwig von Mises. It will definitely change your life if you haven't read something really similar. But I totally agree that like it is amazing what Matt has done with this thing. I think it's going to have a big impact. Matt Corallo is what Vitalik Buterin pretends to be, right? If you want to see somebody that's like really, really freaking brilliant that started doing amazing stuff when they were, a teenager, Matt's your guy if you're looking for the genuine
high
article.
School, man. Matt started this stuff in freaking high school. It's absolutely amazing.
Totally. And he's not shipping stuff that's not actually solving real hard problems. And that's, once, Vortex, guys like me that have been in this industry for a while, it's pretty easy for us to just see through, a nice put together PDF or vaporware or a slide deck or something. And guys like Matt, they go after really freaking hard problems again and again and again. And it's just impressive to see that. And yeah, the Stratum stuff was a nightmare. I to kind of illustrate the way that this stuff sort of viral and has like an extending impact. I had an idea for a project. I wanted to start it. I spent some time and energy trying to figure out how to do it. And Stratum was such a nightmare that I decided just to shelf it. And then I heard that Matt was working on this and I was relieved that maybe I could fire it back up in the future. So I'm sure that applies to a lot of other people as well that have thought of useful things that they could do to extend and develop the mining protocol. So it's just great. The thing I wanted to say about sort of mining electricity costs is that if I don't know exactly how much we're spending right now, but I know that it's a whole lot less than this metric that I have in mind. And that is, I would like Bitcoin to consume roughly 10% of all of the money spent on national defense spending. Even if it was just the United States, the number of trillions of dollars a year that's spent on bombs and missiles and troops and the new jet that's several $billion and the new fleet, not one, but an entire fleet of submarines that we're building that are each $100 billion when you factor in all of the maintenance and all that other stuff. If we just take 10% of global defense spending and spend it on something that creates a secure money that makes it very unprofitable, or at least very much less profitable to steal somebody's stuff, that is going to be the bargain of the millennium. And so we're not anywhere near using too much yet. And then go ahead.
But yeah, just people need to understand the only reason that you can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a single missile or on a single machine like a submarine is when money is free, is when money is printed. Because I guarantee you, the people will not consent to $100 billion freaking submarine. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But sorry, go ahead, GW.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, what we're seeing is a modern day version of slavery where there's nothing that I can do to stop you from stealing my money. And you can spend it on whatever you want. And if you spend it on defense, then you can give a big chunk of that money through to a friend that's a contractor, and there can be all kinds of inefficiencies and graft in the process. And that's the world that we live in. And it's an incredible amount of money that's being spent. I mean, you look at the wars in the Middle East, they're basically PR campaigns that we have to engage in so we can justify Trump increasing defense spending, national defense spending in the United States. One of the first things he did, he increased it by 10%. That is unbelievable to happen in a time of no war of any measurable degree. Then, all the conservatives that are worried about the tax cuts and the tax breaks and all that sort of stuff that, we're getting from our dear leader. These guys are also not paying attention to the fact that the biggest chunk of spending is defense, and he increased it by 10%. Where's that money going to come from? Well, it's got to come from money printing. And all that's going to do is devalue the dollar even further, even more aggressively, and push more Bitcoin adoption. But that's great because that's what we need. We need to get to a place where it's just really, I mean, if you think about it just on a very simple philosophical level, we have to make it very expensive to steal people's stuff. And if we do that, less people's stuff will be stolen systematically through various forms of slavery, and it will be less attractive to attack somebody if it's harder to steal their stuff. And that's really at like a deep level what Bitcoin gives us. So if it costs several $1 trillion a year, it is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to the environment and the best thing that's ever happened to humanity. And I don't think we'll actually have to go that far, but that's my mark. When we hit 10% of all global defense spending, then I'll say, well, maybe it's getting out of hand, or maybe it's worth looking at. Until then, it's not even close. And we're not anywhere near that.
And again, there's the only reason why wars can last for years these days in the modern age is because of the endless money printing. Wars used to never ever last very long at all because it was so expensive to actually have a war. You had to actually use hard money. Anytime the side was even being swayed a little bit, bam, the war was over. Like that was it. It was done because they knew they could see the writing on the wall. They're not going to go and spend more money to occupy another country for a freaking decade.
Yep, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So my last point is really, I guess, more directly to the question, is mining getting decentralized? Absolutely, it's getting decentralized. And just as importantly, the manufacturing of mining hardware is getting commoditized. And everybody is looking at like Bitmain as the villain, and they are the villain in multiple ways. But I think it's important that we remember they didn't have a monopoly because there was no government that was using violence to prevent anybody from entering the market. And if you don't have that, you don't have a monopoly. Those guys were early movers. They invested early, and they got very, very rewarded in a big way for doing good things. And that was investing in ASIC manufacturing and investing in hardware that was run using electricity that those guys bought to secure the network. So they're a mixed actor. Like they did a lot of good for the network. They've used a lot of those profits to do a lot of evil. But like with all businesses that have high profits in a free market, they eventually get competition, and it doesn't happen overnight. But when potential competitors see profits over a prolonged period of time, they get involved, and that's what we're seeing now. And again, I think that's why we're seeing this big attempt to change the proof of work. It's the death rattle of a incumbent, and it's beautiful.
It's an excellent point, JW, and it's also worth saying that with all of these countries and companies getting involved, they'll have no choice but to get involved. Now they're chatting, and I forgot what I was going to say, but it was along the lines of the budgets, and they'll have no choice. But let's go to the exit
sure it was
question.
Profound, Thomas. Profound.
Yeah, all right. Exit question. Which country in the world will become the most bullish about Bitcoin and why? Gabriel D. Vine.
Going with Venezuela.
Venezuela. Jeffrey Jones.
Sorry, what was the question? I was reading the chat.
Which country will be the most bullish about Bitcoin?
Whichever country has the most economic turmoil from their central bank and government.
And JW Weatherman.
I'm going to say the United States. I think there's a lot of people in power that know that the jig is up and that the dollar is going down. I think we see the Chinese and other folks really asserting their muscles a little bit and showing that they're not going to play ball with the U.S. dollar anymore. And when an empire is coming to an end, there's a lot of smart people that know when to get out. And a lot of those folks have a lot of money in the United States right now. So I'm betting the United States is the big winner.
I remember what I was going to say on the power comparison data. They always say that Bitcoin's using as much power as Ireland or as much power as Greece or some other small country. They never say Bitcoin's using a 0.01 of the US military's power or a less than 1% of the global military power. So I think that's a much better way to look at it that JW brought up there. Moving on to issue 4, running towards regulation. Coinbase acquired securities dealer Keystone Capital on Wednesday in a bid to become an SEC-regulated broker-dealer, while the Goldman Sachs-backed Circle is said to be seeking a federal banking license. With more and more businesses running into the welcoming arms of government regulators, is Bitcoin finally going mainstream in the world of finance? Gabriel D. Vine.
I'm going to say no, and I think I was surprised for about 2 seconds when I read that headline earlier this week. And then I thought about it and I thought, oh, well, no, it makes perfect sense. Of course, Coinbase is like a bank. They have total ownership of your Bitcoin and you have a claim on it. If they get hacked, you're not going to get it, or you'll be, seventh in line to get whatever tiny fraction is left over. And they have a lot to gain in their business, in my opinion, by paying the extortion fees in order to move into into other areas of business, and that includes what I like to call old finance with a capital O. And I'm not at all surprised about this. I think that's actually much more intelligent than supporting Vtrash or Ethereum. This makes a lot more sense to me because they'll be able to have cross correlations between these things that they'll be able to make money off of that don't exist right now. What you might call bridges and pathways in the ecosystem. But I'm sure most of it is for just doing the traditional business and running up against the traditional banks who don't have a digital first approach, and that's why their business is fallow, and they're going to basically paper themselves into non-existence over the next few years. Whereas fintech companies like Circle and Coinbase, I think will be able to weather the storm a bit better. And as we've pointed out many times, while creating currency out of thin air to earn interest on, which is the current bank's business model, will not exist at all. Fractional reserve will only exist on the margins until you get caught, essentially kind of like 19th century gold-backed paper that wasn't, if you start not holding the gold, all you need is a bank run and you're out of business. So I don't see fractional reserve in the future of our economy that's runs on top of Bitcoin. But there's still plenty of demand for full reserve loans and also possibly storage solutions. I mean, that's obviously not Coinbase's gig, but that's the traditional banking task that if you want to have some sort of managed storage or help with your security. Obviously, it's not as good as having a gold vault under your castle, but if you need that service, I think it's a valid service to offer, and it's a banking service that will exist in the Bitcoin land. So I'm not surprised at all.
J.W. Weatherman.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, man? I was so excited to be honest, I was just like zoning out a little bit, thinking about all the stuff that Vortex said about ending the freaking war state. I watched a documentary this morning about the tunnel rats in Vietnam, and there was a kid that looked like he couldn't have been more than 17 years old digging through tunnels with a knife in one hand and a handgun in the other, trying to disconnect booby traps. And I'm a little bit fired up about just the amount of death and destruction the state has brought upon the world. And so he got me all pissed off, basically. So,
so we're talking about Bitcoin and the world of finance. Has Bitcoin gone mainstream with all the regulation and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think it's working at a pretty good clip. I think a lot of the folks that are controlling those systems have done a good job not to. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, if you're running the Federal Reserve and you've got 2 years left, right? Like you're Janet Yellen or whoever the current jackass is, and you're looking at Bitcoin and you realize that it's a competitor. Your best play, you've only got 2 years left to fleece the public, right? Your best play as the head of this monstrosity is actually to become a Bitcoin investor. But you want to be able to do that before everybody else does. So you're not going to say nice things about it, and you're not going to encourage an ETF or whatever among the political elites that you're connected with at the SEC and other folks like that. So I think the pace that those folks are moving into Bitcoin and slowly, like you can pretty much guarantee they're already in Bitcoin before they say nice things about it, right? I think the pace that's happening is absolutely insane. I cannot believe that at that scam fest of consensus, the best speaker was the St. Louis Federal Reserve chair, and he did not say that Bitcoin wouldn't replace the US dollar. He said he doesn't think it's going to replace the US dollar soon. I think things are going well, man.
Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah, so I guess let me be very, very, very clear for the public here. Bitcoin is not running towards regulation. Bitcoin is simply being Bitcoin, the same that it always has. It's it's basically regulation, and regulators are learning more about what Bitcoin and crypto is. Bitcoin is not going to do anything differently than it has for the past 9 years. It's going to continue running, going to continue providing this alternative monetary system. Opt-in, this global voluntary opt-in monetary system that anybody in the entire world can access, while the regulators go and run around trying to figure out what it is. It doesn't matter what they think it is. Bitcoin is here to stay, and it's not going anywhere. And let me be very clear again. Bitcoin doesn't need you. You need Bitcoin. This is how it works. And Bitcoin will continue to work, continue to produce blocks every single 10 minutes. So, with that aside, like basically, yes, absolutely. Coinbase is a freaking bank. It always has been a bank. It was a bank. Their superpower is regulatory compliance. This is what they do best. They are not a technology company. They have some of the worst technology in the entire space. They just recently launched something called Coinbase Pro, and it was worse than the previous product that they had to replace GDAX with. There's all sorts of articles you can go and read that's written up on it, but this is it's so many times has Coinbase failed technologically that it's ridiculous. And anytime there's any type of price run up, they go down, and that's not stopping anytime soon. They simply do not understand the underlying technology that they are claiming that they serve. I can't really say enough bad things about their technology, essentially. So we'll leave it with that. But at the same time, this, as others have mentioned, this companies like Coinbase are just an on-ramp. They're a temporary situation. They're a temporary company. They're not going to be here very much longer. They are the AOL. They're going to onboard, many millions of users to crypto. And then just like with AOL, they will leave the walled garden and they will go for greener pastures where there is tons and tons of economic activity, tons and tons of economic opportunity. This is the internet of money, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon.
Completely agree. The only time that I almost lost a ton of money was when I was helping a friend send like 25K. I think I was he was trying to get his money out of Coinbase because they froze his account. And this is like a software executive, right? This is not like somebody that's buying pot on Silk Road or something, right? They locked his account down.
25K, that'd be a lot of pot.
I'm not sure. I'll take your word for it, man.
He had duffel bags and he had a truck and a warehouse, but
yeah. So this is my Coinbase story. Basically, I was helping him move the money out because he was nervous about it, even though I had told him to buy a hardware wallet and all that sort of stuff. So I get an address on a Trezor, I think. I go into Coinbase. I say to send the money. It says there's an error. It can't send the money, right? It's some JavaScript error thing. I'm like, all right. And he realizes at that point that he is not sure that he has retained control of all of his seeds, right? He set up his seed like 6 months ago. So I'm like, no problem. Let's just wipe it because there's no money on it. It didn't send from Coinbase, and we'll start over. The only reason that 25K didn't turn into dust is that he happened to have another Trezor. But I was 20 seconds from nuking his Trezor and starting over. And when I went back to Coinbase, it said the money was out and it had already gone to that address, and then it showed up. But I was, within moments of destroying $25,000 of my friend's money. So I am not a huge fan of Coinbase, if you can believe it. I am a big fan of BISC, though. It's a decentralized exchange, and I get extra pleasure out of talking about a competitor of Coinbase and recommending those guys. So check that out. And that is a system that's trying to be government hard like Bitcoin. It's doing its best. It's a really hard problem. It's not as good as Bitcoin, but it is a decentralized application that allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin without having to share your identity with the next Equifax.
Let's also plug HODL, a decentralized exchange.
Yeah, good deal. I don't know too much about those guys. I haven't actually tested it, but yeah, I'm excited that there's more and more folks showing up. Have you used HODL?
Yeah, I hadn't purchased but I've used the software, so I've downloaded it and checked it out. Completely free to check out. I haven't actually made any transactions yet, so but definitely highly recommend it so far. Everything is really easy to use. I'm hearing a lot of positive feedback because I'm hearing from people that actually have used it, and so they've been very happy with it.
Excellent. Good stuff. Death to Coinbase.
Well, I'll tell you, I, for one, am looking forward to using Coinbase Pro. I'm sick and tired of using the amateur version. Jokes. Let's move on to the exit question. Is the world of finance eating Bitcoin, or is Bitcoin eating the world of finance? Gabriel D. Vine.
Bitcoin is eating the world of finance.
J.W. Weatherman.
Absolutely. Every time these guys buy a little bit of Bitcoin, they reward themselves, but they also just cut the throat of the Leviathan at the same time.
Jeffrey Jones.
The famous quote of software eating the world is definitely happening. And Bitcoin is the software that will eat finance.
It's the Trojan horse. They never should have brought it in the walls. Everything was going so well right up until then. Gabriel D. Vine, it's the end of the show. Are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week?
Yeah, just a bit of a story, and just to help kick my own butt here and give myself a little bit of a push, I'd like to announce that I am developing a secret project. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you all.
I thought for sure you were going to be running for Congress. That's the only thing that could explain that hair.
All right. To kick your butt, you got to give us a date, because that didn't do anything. You got to tell us when you're going to tell us the project.
That's a great idea. Let's see. It is June 8th today. So it's talk to you in 10 weeks. So that's nice. Third week of August.
All right. Looking forward to it, man. That's exciting.
All right. J.W. Weatherman, prediction or story of the week?
Story of the week is we need to get off of recommending people go to bitcoin.org. From what I understand, it's completely controlled by a guy that goes by the name of Cobra, and he has pushed security vulnerabilities, proof of work changes, things that would have destroyed mining decentralization, which we're all excited about. He's an unpredictable character. So time to take that code, fork it, jump over to a new domain that's being managed by somebody that's trustworthy. Hopefully somebody in the community will step up to do that everybody recognizes has a reputation that has value and isn't worth burning. And we'll just keep doing that. We'll let them take over bitcoin.com, and then we'll move, and then we'll let them take over bitcoin.org, and we'll move, and we'll just keep doing that, because all we have to do is change all of our links, focus on the new domain name, pump the new domain name. Most of the noobs that are coming into the space are going to do a Google search, and we can destroy their Google search rankings as a community overnight and create all of that same value on another domain. So we don't have to get kicked around by these guys. And I think it's time that we start doing that.
It's strange how many problems we have with these centralized systems like the domain registrar system, where someone like Roger can just own Bitcoin.com forever. And no matter how much the community votes, even if Steve Wozniak himself came down and said no, he would still own Bitcoin.com. So it would be pretty great if you could redirect the Google searches. Gabriel Devon, an update, Future Rant Unlimited, Future Rant ABC.
These are the ideas that you guys are on the right track, maybe. But I just wanted to say, if you want to get the latest on this project and many other things, definitely check out my Twitter at Gabriel Devine.
All right, and Jeffrey Jones, a story of the week or a prediction. Go ahead.
Excuse me. So never cough into the mic. That's the first step. But basically, I have a couple of stories here. Essentially, so there was some FUD about mining in Canada there, about how Quebec halts Bitcoin mining power requests. And I just want to assure everybody that, they're only temporarily halting the request because of the unprecedented demand. I mean, there is huge amounts of mining demand that is waiting in the wings to go to Canada. And again, because of the amount of profit you can make from Bitcoin mining, there's huge amounts of people ready and waiting. So I wanted to say that just this is not going to slow or stop any of the hash power from going into Canada. And in fact, I was just informed a few minutes ago from Francis Pouliot, who is runs a couple of Bitcoin companies up there in Canada. And he says that basically the breaking news, the first official draft of the Canadian KYC AML regulations of virtual currency businesses has just been published by the Department of Finance. And what that essentially means is that for Canada now, Bitcoin can now be regulated just like regular money. So essentially it's a money service business. So it'll now be regulated just like a standard MSB, and people which has very, very, very clearly defined regulations that now even more Bitcoin business can start to take off in Canada, that people can be assured of this now. So they can start even more huge businesses and more mining and more. It's just going to keep getting more and more crazy. So that's really cool. That's really good news. There's going to be more, regulations that'll eventually just kind of see Bitcoin in many different lights, in many different ways. But the first step is to just get the money part of it, sort of regulated correctly or understood correctly before we, start going into some crazy stuff. Because Bitcoin is going to evolve much faster than anybody can regulate it. So meanwhile, Bitcoin's already on all sorts of other use cases, but they're still worrying about Bitcoin as money. So, that's fine. Let them, be 10 years behind. But this is an important step for Canada and for Bitcoin across the world, getting more and more understood by regulators. And so I'm very happy to see this.
All right. Thanks so much, Vortex. I just want to thank everybody in the chat for watching. Give us a thumbs up at home. Be sure to subscribe down below. You can also click the bell for notifications. And we have the audio podcast if you just want audio, you don't want the video. Shout out to Jeremy in the chat. He's been doing the moderation. That's hard work. He's also been doing timestamps. So everybody be nice to Jeremy. Say something nice to Jeremy while you're down there in the chat. We do have a Bitcoin meetup tonight in Las Vegas, hosted by the Bitcoin Las Vegas meetup at bitcoinlasvegas.org. You can join us on 4th Street Experience. I even think Jeffrey Jones might be there. Thomas Hunt and Jeffrey Jones in person, kind of a little post-Bitcoin group hangout, kind of an after show party, but we'll be hanging out with some Bitcoiners. No big deal, just chilling, getting some drinks and some chips and food. I had an idea today. I kind of wanted a desktop computer. I'm tired of plugging in all my USB-C ports and them not working time I sit down at the computer. So I thought I could get a desktop, and that'd be pretty cool. And then I had this idea. What if I feature this desktop computer on some of my Bitcoin shows where I use the further away camera? Do you think companies would sponsor it? So I reached out to companies and said, for $500 a sticker, you can have a sticker on my desktop. So that's worth a shot. I also made this cool graphic. You might recognize the style of it. You've seen a lot of these great graphics on my feed against my will. So I thought that'd be fun. One desktop giveaway. And so far we've raised around 0.07 Bitcoin toward our goal of 0.36. So if you'd like to donate today, it'll help me get a desktop so I can just sit down. I don't have to plug it in. And this QR code is the same thing. And that's about it for today's show. And hang out at the meetup. We'll be there tonight. And until next time, bye.
Bye.
And apparently Jeffrey Jones doesn't live in Vegas. He's just visiting here. You're so wrong. You guessed wrong at home. Bye.